Hello, I'm Lex Gillette. I am a four-time Paralympic medalist and world champion in the long jump for Team USA. I am currently training for the Tokyo Paralympic Games. But prior to all of that, I originally grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina. I had sight up until I was 8 years old, and once I was eight, I started to experience sight loss, and it was due to recurrent retina detachments that led to a string of 10 operations that I had, of which they were unsuccessful. And after the last one, doctors said there was nothing else they could do to help my sight. And they said that I would eventually become blind. So from that point, it was go home, go through your normal routine, go to sleep at night, wake up the next morning, see a little less than what you did the day before, excuse me, until one day I woke up and I couldn't make out much of anything anymore. But the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed in 1990, so I was, I think it was 5 or 6 years old. Um, but I would say my first encounter with me not having the same access as the next person was as a freshman in high school. I can remember I had algebra the very first period of the school day. And for whatever reason, I used to always arrive to school late. It wasn't my fault. I rode the bus to school, and I lived clear across the other side of the city. And the school that I went to, they had a visually impaired program specifically, set for individuals who are blind and visually impaired. And so you would go to that school because that VIP, the visually impaired program, was integrated to that particular public school. So instead of going to a blind school specifically, I stayed mainstream, and going to that high school meant that I would get the resources and accommodations necessary in being successful academically. But circling back to the bus, for whatever reason, I used to always show up to school like 25, 30 minutes late. And that was challenging trying to get to school. I'm basically missing all of algebra at that particular time, and not really being able to learn and absorb the information like the next kids. And it was a challenge. It was something that I struggled through, and eventually I had to take that class over again. Actually, um, that was kind of one aspect that I experienced, and then the second one I would say once I got into athletics as a Paralympian, when you're in a sprint competition as a Paralympian who's blind, when you're in a sprint competition, you have someone who guides you, which means that you need two lanes. You have one lane for yourself, and then the lane beside you for your guide. And although I was participating in the long jump at that time, I also wanted to sprint. However, for whatever reason, the Athletics Association, I wasn't allowed to have a second lane, which meant that I wouldn't be able to run the 100 meters or the 200 meters. And that was that was saddening. I mean, I felt like I was fast. I know that I'm fast. I wanted to participate. I wanted to experience that just like the rest of my teammates. And the fact that I couldn't do that, that wasn't cool. It didn't feel good at all. I wanted to be able to have that same access, just like anyone else. I do think that now those that has actually changed. So kudos to that change being made. But then you also think about it. Imagine that you're an athlete and you miss out on 6, 7 years or so of not being able to um, participate. And I'm sorry, let me explain myself better. So of course, in high school, you have 4 years, and I'm thinking about myself specifically. I didn't start running the 100 until maybe 2 or 3 years after high school. So when you add those 4 years from high school plus the 2 or 3 after I graduated, now you're looking at 6, 7 years of not being able to participate in that event. And as an athlete, time is time is important. Time is undefeated. At some time, you're not going to be able to jump as high. You're not going to be able to run as fast as you did previously. And so that was time that I lost. But as long as the people who come after me, the athletes who come after me, I would want them to have that opportunity to compete so that they can experience that, so they can live their best lives. In my experience, I definitely think that the ADA has made a difference. I have a lot of friends, a lot of a lot of individuals who I know who have a disability, and they've gone on to do amazing things professionally, athletically. I think that when I think about my experience specifically, even outside of athletics, when I graduated from college, I my first job was working for the Parks and Rec, excuse me, for Raleigh Parks and Rec, and I was a program coordinator for the visually impaired program, and it was awesome to be able to step into that role and have a screen reader installed on the computer. It was amazing to have the ability to print things out in braille or in large print. Mind you, we did serve the population who they are blind and visually impaired. So you would expect that you have all of those accommodations. Um, but who's to say that it's not that way for other programs around the country? I mean, I don't know. Could be totally different. But to be able to step into that role and to be able to do my job effectively, that's a really good feeling. To know that we talk about the medical and social model of disability, and talking about how we are disabled because of how society is set up and how it operates. And when we don't have those accommodations, when we don't have that accessible technology or any of the resources that help us do our job, that is that's not a good feeling, because you don't feel as though you can succeed and that you can get that sense of fulfillment. Like, we all have something uniquely special to offer this world, and when we're not given the proper tools to be able to share that with the world, that is you're doing us a disservice, most certainly. So I definitely think that the ADA is helped out for sure. And even one of the other cool things, as an athlete, I'm able to have sponsors that help fuel my journey to the Paralympic Games. And right now, I'm working with Intel, and to have conversations with them surrounding potential technology that could help me within my sport, and ultimately help other blind and visually impaired athletes, and who knows, could also help athletes with varying degrees of disability, all types of disabilities. To have those conversations with them, for them to be a soundboard, for them to bounce things off of me, and for us to have a conversation, it lets me know that this is a part of their thinking, and that's how it should be. I think that is an absolutely incredible thing. There will be way more people after me who come along. They may be athletes, they may not be athletes, they may be employees of Intel or any organization. And I think that we should always have those things in mind, so that we can give access to anyone who may come through our doors, anyone who may sit at our desks, anyone who may step on our tracks, our field of play, whatever. They should be able to step into that environment, step into that role, and know that they can confidently achieve what needs to be done. One of the things that I think, well, a couple of things that I feel could change as it relates to the ADA moving forward is I think that companies and organizations should make an effort to truly involve persons with a disability in some of those leadership roles in those higher positions, because as as it stands right now, we don't see a lot of them in those positions. And I'm sorry, when I say them, I don't see any other individuals, no pun intended, who are blind and individuals who may use a wheelchair or whatever disability you have. I would most certainly love to know that we have individuals in those places of power to ensure that we have our perspective being voiced at the table, to make sure that people are held accountable, to make sure that they're doing things in an appropriate manner that will make all of us feel welcome, specifically people with a disability. I also think that as much as we do have the legislation, we also need to get to the point where people's hearts and minds have been won over. I've had some individuals say the most insensitive things to me as it relates to well, I thought that you needed some help, or specifically I'll use their word, a quote unquote handler. And that's very insensitive, and that's very much, I don't need that. I come from an environment where my mom, she expected me to do everything that I needed to do to ensure I could be successful, be independent, and live on my own. So for someone to say something of that magnitude, it circles back to, yeah, the ADA is awesome, but we need to win over people's hearts and minds so that they don't have that type of thinking, and that they don't say those types of things, because that's truly, it's insensitive, it's derogatory, it's very offensive. Some of the things that we can do right now, I think that most certainly having conversation is huge, and we're at a space and time right now where a lot of conversation is being had, and we're learning, we're educating, we're being educated, and I think that that's a really good thing. I also understand that some of these conversations may be tough. People don't want to, they're afraid that they're going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And in all honesty, as a person with a disability, I can say that if we come to the table and your sole intent is to make the situation better and make the lives better of me and everyone who has a disability, um, I think that it's safe to say that, listen, let's talk about it. Um, if you're coming from a genuine space, I'm going to understand that. I'm going to pick that up. And if it is something that comes across that needs to be adjusted, that needs to be fixed, then I'll certainly let you know that, because there's going to be other individuals after me, and you're going to need to know how to conduct yourself and how to speak appropriately and treat them appropriately. So I think that having that conversation is huge. I also think that, yeah, it's great to talk, but let's come to a point where we can have some action, where we can make sure that kids have accessible technology, where we can make sure that potential employers have um, you know, the necessary training or the necessary accommodations to help them do their job effectively. I think that you're not only helping them, but you're helping the company as well. For a person with a disability to be able to do their job 1,000%, like, and to feel good about that, ultimately, it's making your organization better. And if your organization is focused on revenue and money and all of that other stuff, then making sure that that person has everything that they need is going to ensure that your ROI increases. So I definitely think that talking is good, but let's put some walking behind that as well.